Finally, one of the questions I've been asked in recent times is, do vaccines make a difference? The answer is yes, an enormous one. To put it bluntly, if you've had the vaccine, you are less likely to catch COVID-19 and much less likely to get sick or die if you do. In fact, the risk of infection, according to the CDC, is reduced threefold in vaccinated people.
What about all the fully vaccinated people who get the breakthrough infection? Can they pass it on? Could they pass it on to their children? Could they pass the virus on to older people, especially more vulnerable people with underlying health conditions?
And that's exactly the point that we made in our guidance. So yes, they can with the Delta variant. And that was the reason that we changed our guidance last Tuesday. Our vaccines are working exceptionally well. They continue to work well for Delta with regard to severe illness and death. They prevent it. But what they can't do anymore is prevent transmission. So if you're going home to somebody who has not been vaccinated, to somebody who can't get vaccinated, somebody who might be immunosuppressed or a little bit frail, somebody who has comorbidities that put them at high risk, I would suggest you wear a mask in public indoor settings.
Especially if there is a breakthrough case, you get COVID, you're fully vaccinated, but you are totally asymptomatic, you could still pass on the virus to someone else. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And that's where our masking recommendation came from.
Well, there you have it. I stand corrected. As it turns out, Rochelle Walensky just did admit, as she said in her own words, they can do a lot of things, but what they can't do now is stop transmission. Meaning every one of you that got the vaccination because you were told you would be protecting your neighbor, it was the altruistic thing to do to protect your neighbor. Well, as it turns out, you're not protecting your neighbor. You are just as dangerous as anybody else on this planet. If we're going to take the spreading of colds and flus as some sort of moral judgment upon ourselves, then all of that is over. The vaccinated are just as infectious and just as much transmitting as any natural human being walking this planet. So I stand corrected. There it is. I told you, if we ever get something wrong, I'll be the first to tell you.
In the cohorting that we have, keep in mind, we are a matter of days away from opening up to everybody, and then it will be up to everybody to go out and get vaccinated. Go. As you can hear, for the most part, we're intending to continue our rollout as planned. That means continuing to open up age bands for bookings. So from today, as we had previously planned, those aged 40 plus can visit bookmyvaccine.co.nz to make their bookings. And if you're in that group, I encourage you to do so. That's bookmyvaccine. We come then to decisions that are being made to provide extra protection for those who are working during level 4. Earlier this week, Cabinet had made decisions on mask use. Ministers with Power to Act met again this morning to confirm those decisions and ensure they had the coverage we would expect. From 11:50 p.m. tonight, it will be mandatory for everyone aged 12 and over to wear a mask when they are visiting any of the essential services that are currently open, including supermarkets, pharmacies and service stations. It will also be a requirement for staff who work in those places to wear a mask also. This is about ensuring those workers are protected and ensuring those who visit them are too. As you'll know, it's already a requirement to wear a mask on public transport and planes, and that will now include places like bus terminals and also taxis. Simply put, at level 4, if you're in a place that is allowed to be open to provide services to people or transport, you must wear a mask.
When you look at what the CDC has recommended now, they're basically saying everybody should be masked, right? And we talked about the fact that there has been no study that would back that up. So the question is, and you say you did some studies then, but you did them with dummies. Where have they been for the past, ever since then? What's been going on for the past 9-10 months? Why don't we have data rather than, as you say, just opinion that's leading this push with our schools?
I think it's a fair criticism. A fair criticism. You heard, I think in the Wall Street Journal, they talked about $42 billion of NIH funding and less than 2% was on COVID. I mean, these are critical questions. Is routine screening twice a week in a school, is that the real way to limit inter-school transmission? Is it, wearing masks or not wearing masks? I'm of the point of view that this has to be locally decided as opposed to a general mandate, particularly in the absence of data. But I've said before, I do believe that masks are better than having received a vaccine that didn't work in you. But that's not to say that I'm convinced that we can make the statements that the best way to protect kids in school is, as some has advocated, universal masking. I think maybe better ventilation, maybe better desanitation, maybe routine testing twice a week to identify silent epidemic, maybe reinforcing in parents that they don't send their kids to school if they're sick and they don't send them to school if their siblings are sick.
So do you think the current CDC rule that all kids should wear masks, you're saying that the current CDC is wrong on this issue?
I'm saying that I haven't been able to review data that supports that recommendation.
Okay.
I have not reviewed data that supports that. And he even said, particularly in the absence of data, these are very difficult decisions to follow. I mean, in the absence of data. So there we are. You have the former head of the CDC that saw all of last year's information. He's watching, and I'm sure he gets a phone call once in a while and can ask some friends still on the inside, you want to hand me some of that data? I mean, when he makes the statement, I still stand by my previous statement that the mask is certainly going to be better than the vaccine that didn't work for you. I mean, it's an amazing statement, isn't it? I mean, better than the thing that's doing not anything at all. I mean, it's supposed to be wrap some toilet paper around your head. I would say that works a little bit better too. But at least he's being honest. We cannot be making decisions based on a lack of data and a lack of science. But what we do have is quite a bit of science out there showing the dangers of masks, whether it's the high CO2 levels or the collection of bacteria and viruses that are collecting around the face in a very moist space. All of those things are at play in these school meetings. Don't you wish you could just bring in the former head of the CDC and stand there right next to you when you're in these meetings and say, but don't take my word for it. How about the former head of the CDC that, by the way, got us into the middle of this entire mess? That's the world we live in. And as though,
Our enforcement approach with masks would probably be similar to road policing, which is we'll be out there, we'll be looking, and when we'll see something, we'll do something which may include enforcement action.
Do you have the ability to fine people, or?
Yes, we do have the ability to issue infringements for that kind of offence.
As far as arresting someone for not wearing a mask?
I need to check whether that's an option. Probably what would occur would be a fine for not wearing a mask, and then if there's a direction to wear a mask and there's no reason why they're allowed to decline and they fail to follow that direction, an arrest is theoretically possible. But we don't want to end up there. We actually want people to understand why we're doing this and do the right thing.
Can you remind us how much that fine could be?
I'd need to check that, but it's likely to be in the region of a few $100s. I need to confirm.
Regarding the protest and the approach to them this morning, that's quite different from...
While we have a captive audience where one of the few activities they can undertake is going out to get a vaccination. On the Wallabies, they were not in New South Wales before they travelled to New Zealand. They had been in Queensland, which of course, as we know, has had far fewer issues than New South Wales, and my understanding is they had been there for some time. You'll see at a safe distance, the Minister of Sport is sitting behind you, and I'm sure